So when it comes to this decision that was handed down today, this thing, it was beyond questionable. At every single turn, it basically takes the side not of the son, but of AH, which is quite peculiar. And yeah, let's you and I talk about that now. So hey there. So today, you and I, we return to that not-so-wonderful world of litigation, where apparently accusation, it stands above substantiation. And hey, if you come up with enough stories, you're always to be believed. Now, what's fascinating about this decision is the fact that it has quite a few things attached to it. And today I want to hyper-focus on one point. I want to focus on the idea of credibility. Why? Because this decision, it hinges on the idea of credibility. And well, it didn't matter what popped up. Apparently everything one person had to say, all of that stuff was credible. See, something that people need to understand is the idea of credibility. It was paramount in this decision. And if the judge would have said, yeah, that person over there, they're not credible, well, the decision would have gone the other way because liability, oh yeah, it was indeed a factor. Now, what's fascinating here is there's two challenges to credibility. They're thrown out. There's one with a letter to Department of Homeland Security. There's another you're going to see more of. It's a little event that's going to happen in Australia. And those, they were dismissed. In fact, they were dismissed in a way that, well, let's just look at this. On the 28th of September, 2014, a letter was written to the Department of Homeland Security in these terms. My name is A.H. I'm a proud, lawful American citizen. I'm writing these letters in response to a fraudulent report made against my English friend, Savannah McMillan. It has come to my awareness that while spending time visiting me in the United States, someone made a false claim against her, stating, without any proof or corroboration, that she was unlawfully working for me. As my friend, I can say truthfully and unequivocally that these allegations are entirely false. It was clearly made from the safety of anonymity in order to satisfy a personal vendetta. This allegation absolutely bears no merit, worth, or truth. I would like to go on record as saying that Savannah McMillan is a personal friend and to my knowledge has never worked unlawfully or otherwise in the United States or for me. I regret that the precious time of our immigration agencies has been on such a petty personal matter made out of malice, not truth. I would like to request that this fraudulent report be removed pending the confirmation of its baseless and false stance. I expect that the same standards that we hold as pillars in our great justice system be allied to immigration policies as they serve at the forefront in representing the United States and her values. Since I expect further investigation to reveal the statements made above as true, I hope your agency will see to it that no further inconvenience will befall my friend in her attempts to continue discovering our beautiful country. Thank you for our time. Sincerely, A.H. Now, this letter was said to be a lie because, in truth, Savannah McMillan was working in the United States as A.H.'s assistant. Savannah McMillan is not to be confused with Samantha McMillan, who is a witness for the claimant. In this section, I shall refer to Savannah without, of course, intending any disrespect to Miss McMillan. Now, what's fascinating about this letter is you're going to see two sets of claims here. You're going to have Kate James, who actually supplied checks and on, and you're going to have A.H.'s response. Now, A.H., of course, she's going to get the thumbs up from the judge because, hey, of course, everything is credible. A.H.'s response was that Savannah had worked as her assistant during filming in the U.K., although she had been hired by the production company for the film she had been making, London Fields, not by A.H. herself. Savannah was similarly hired by the production companies for films that A.H. was making outside of the USA. Savannah had accompanied A.H. to the USA, but she did so as A.H.'s friend, not as an employee. Savannah had been detained by U.S. immigration authorities on her arrival to the USA, and it was this experience which led to the letter being written to the Department of Homeland Security. A.H. said that she had not drafted the letter, but she had signed it because she agreed that the substance was correct. There was no lie. Now, Kate James comes into this here. Now, listen to this. I mean, it's very telling. So, Kate James had been A.H.'s assistant in the USA. Miss James' witness statement said that the letter from A.H. falsely claimed that Savannah was just a friend and not an employee. I'm afraid that I did not find Miss James a satisfactory witness. She had been dismissed by A.H. in February of 2015, and the circumstances of her termination still appeared to be a cause for rancor with Miss James. And that's actually true. You know, you would be pretty mad about this stuff, but being mad does not mean that the things you load up, to go out and get revenge, they're not true. She did exhibit to her witness statement a check for $1,625 made out to Savannah McMillan. In her fifth witness statement, A.H. said, "Since Savannah did not have much money, I occasionally gave her money. I would sometimes refer to the money I gave Savannah as payments to minimize the discomfort and embarrassment to Savannah for receiving this money from me. The payments were partly to cover expenses for both of us, like shopping and errands. The money I gave to Savannah was not related to any amounts I paid to Kate James as my assistant." Now, what's fascinating about that is that A.H., when she is testifying, says that these payments, they're for someone going to set up her home, to go out and to buy groceries, and do other things that I don't know your friends wouldn't do. I mean, an assistant, they would definitely go and set up a home. They would go shopping for your groceries. They would basically set up all the menial tasks for your life, but totally not your assistant. Totally not. Right, Judge? Now, not only is Kate James going to get thrown under the bus because A.H., of course, is credible, but you're also going to have another person here thrown under the bus, too, which is pretty much going to be the thing. Anyone that said A.H. isn't telling the truth, they're too connected to this case in some way, or they got a vendetta or something else. So I accept A.H.'s evidence in this regard. I do not consider the letter to Homeland Security was a lie. Aaron B., this is going to be our second person, acted as A.H.'s nurse on occasion. On the 21st of April 2016, A.H. had a dinner to celebrate her 30th birthday. The following day, Miss B. was one of the guests. In a note which she wrote on the occasion, Miss B. referred to arriving with client's UK assistant, Savannah. However, Miss B. did not give evidence before me. There is nothing in the documentation to explain the source of her information that Savannah was then acting as A.H.'s assistant, if indeed Miss B's intent was to convey that by her message. In cross-examination, A.H. said that Savannah was, quote, on and off her assistant, but not in the USA. Miss B's note does not alter my conclusion that A.H. did not lie to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, here's going to be a third person here. Nor do the emails, because this person provides emails, which Kevin Murphy exhibits to the second witness statement, none of which demonstrate that Savannah was employed by or for the benefit of A.H. while Savannah was in the U.S. This allegation she did, therefore, has no bearing on whether A.H. is to be believed in relation to her allegations that she was, we're going to say, accosted by Mr. Depp. Now, a fascinating issue comes up about this. A.H. says in her evidence that, hey, Savannah McMillan actually wrote that letter, but there's a little problem with that. She doesn't get her name right. So a subsidiary issue in this regard ventilated at trial was whether Savannah had drafted the letter, as A.H. said in her evidence. Mr. Shearborn, that's Johnny Depp's attorney, in his closing speech observed that the letter contained two different spellings of her surname. McMillan, you can see this here in the second paragraph, and McMillan in the fourth paragraph. Mr. Shearborn submitted that Savannah was unlikely to have made these errors, both of which were inconsistent with the spelling of her surname in her email address, which she appeared to use. Mr. Shearborn further observed that A.H. had spelled Savannah's surname as, you can see her spelling here, and of course, you can see the issues here, in her affidavit on the 17th of April 2016 in relationship to her prosecution in Australia in relationship to bringing dogs in the country. See further below, because that's going to be excused too. While there may have been some force in his observations there, in my view, it takes the matter no further. Whoever drafted the letter, it had been signed by A.H., who thereby accepted responsibility for its contents as she accepted in her evidence. So, So this is on her, but it's not really on her. When A.H. was cross-examined, the discrepancy in the spelling of Savannah's surname was not put to her. In cross-examination, A.H. agreed that the language of the letter was overblown. She said that, quote, the language was Savannah's. She said, I signed it because it was represented the truth. In any case, the identity of the drafter of the letter does not assist in resolving whether the Department of Homeland Security was lied to by A.H. Besides, the drafter of the letter was not the only person to be challenged by the spelling of Savannah's surname. Whoever wrote the name of the payee on the check, which Miss James exhibits, has given her surname as McMillan, another error. And that has nothing to do with that, by the way. It has to do with the fact Samantha McMillan wouldn't misspell her own freaking name. But hey, let's take it to somewhere else. Now, what's amazing about this issue is that this issue was the one thing that A.H. was terrified of because they thought that it would bring up what they called satellite litigation. Essentially, the judge gave A.H. an out, and well, there'll be quite a few of them in this case, too. The second part here, the conviction in Australia for knowingly making a false declaration regarding the importation of dogs to Australia. So in March 2015, Mr. Depp had been filming one of its Pirates movies in Australia. A.H. had joined him. This was an incident in the RAD. It was also the occasion when Mr. Depp's finger was injured. As a result of the injury to Mr. Depp, the film was disrupted. It did start again in April 2015. At that stage, A.H. was making a film in the UK and then had to attend a promotional event for another film in New York. She flew from New York to L.A., where she met the claimant. The two of them then flew by private charter to the plane to Australia on the 21st of April 2015. They were accompanied by their two dogs, Pistol and Boo. Pistol belonged to A.H. Boo originally belonged to Mr. Depp's mother, but was then owned by them. The plane was met at the airport by quarantine and customs officers. A.H. completed an incoming passenger card, which included the question, are you bringing into Australia animals, parts of animals, etc.? A.H. answered this question, no. The answer was false, since A.H. was accompanied by Pistol and Boo. She knew that it was false, since she knew that she was accompanied by the dogs. In May 2015, there was media coverage of the presence of the dogs in Australia. On the 13th of May 2015, the dogs were ordered into quarantine, and an order was made that they be exported within 72 hours. On the 15th of May 2015, the dogs were taken out of Australia. On or about the 8th of July 2015, A.H. was charged with 3 offenses. I do not have the details of them. That the third offense was under, they talk about the code here, because she had produced a document, namely an incoming passenger card, to Cara B., an Australian Customs and Border Protection officer, knowing that said document was false. On the 13th of October 2015, A.H. provided an unsworn statement to the prosecution regarding her actions and state of mind. On the 3rd of November 2015, there was an indication that she would plead guilty to the charge of knowingly making a false statement on the basis that the other 2 charges were discontinued. That was acceptable to the prosecution, and the court therefore treated the guilty plea as timely. On the 17th of April 2016, A.H. swore in an affidavit in which, inter alia, set on her belief that the necessary documentation for the dog's entry into Australia had been provided separately, and accordingly, it was not necessary for her to declare their presence at customs entry. A.H. was dealt with for this offense by B. Callahan, sitting at Southport Magistrates Court on the 18th of April 2016. A report in The Guardian from the 18th of April 2016 said that the magistrate was, and they gave a name here. In the course of her sentencing remarks, Miss Callahan said this. At the time of A.H.'s departure from Australia in April 2015, A.H. was unaware the documentation for the dog's importation into Australia had not been completed. She relied on staff to organize this. You notice she's throwing other people under the bus yet again here, along with the other travel arrangements. Just prior on A.H. leaving for Australia, her assistant, one of the staff responsible for for the documentation had been dismissed from her employment in acrimonious circumstances. This is a reference to Miss James. There were difficulties associated with this, and that had repercussions on the preparation of the documentation concerning the importation of the dogs. Further to this, A.H. had a belief that, at the time of arriving, that the form she'd filled out did not cover her pets. You know, animals. It, of course, doesn't cover pets. She believed that the relevant paperwork had been completed for the dogs and provided to the Australian authorities separately. I accept that she did not deliberately set out to deceive the Australian authorities. I also accept that it's not a question of a person believing she's above the law. In pleading guilty, she accepts responsibility for the offense. Her actions indicate that she is truly remorseful for incorrectly filling out a form. So first of all, I say at the outset this is not a trivial offense. A.H. comes before the court without any criminal history. References provided speak of her generosity and kindness, as I've always spoken about. She's employed as an actor, and this requires a great deal of international travel. Sometimes she travels with her dog, sometimes not. She's always complied with the various rules and regulations concerning such travel. There's genuine remorse and a high degree of cooperation. A.H. has returned to this country to have the matter dealt with, and her husband have provided a video with regards to not making a false declaration. This video, no doubt, will be quite useful for the department. So, Miss Callahan dealt with the offense by finding that it was sufficient to require A.H. to enter into a recognizance supported by security of $1,000 to be of good behavior for 1 month. The offense to which A.H. pleaded guilty involved knowingly making a false statement. As Miss Callahan said, that was not a trivial offense, but its nature is so far removed from the evidence which A.H. gave in this court that its relevance for her credibility is marginal at best. So going out and lying to Australia, well, that's not a big deal at all, not when it comes to her credibility at making other statements and throwing other people under the bus. And see, that's where your credibility comes in, and he's going to pretty much smash those other people here. Allegations that A.H. sought to procure false evidence by Kevin Murphy and Kate James for the purpose of criminal proceedings in Australia. Got to throw that away, of course. Of potentially greater significance is the suggestion advanced by the claimant that A.H. was willing to solicit Kate James to give untruthful evidence and put pressure on Kevin Murphy to give untruthful evidence in her support. I will take these separately. I take first the allegation regarding Kate James. Mr. Shearborn relies on the series of emails between A.H., Carl Austin, A.H.'s entertainment lawyer, and Marty Singer, one of Mr. Depp's American lawyers. On the 9th of October 2015, A.H. wrote to Carl Martin and Marty Singer, in the course of which she said, "The only thing we are missing is evidence of the process being initiated, however not completed, and therefore the dogs weren't taking, spelling there on the trip. That is obviously harder to prove since it involves documenting something that didn't happen. However, since I know we attempted to bring them at least once before on the Australian trip, I can ask Kate to include that in her statement if we would find it helpful." Now, on the same day, you have Marty Singer write back that would be great. And then you're going to get into some other stuff, too. Now, on the 11th of October 2015, A.H. wrote to Kevin Murphy. She forwarded the email chain above, so you have all of that stuff there. And it said, "Kevin, what do you think? Could you possibly reach out for us? Do you think you could get her to do it?" On the same day, Mr. Singer wrote an email to A.H. which included the following. Now look at this statement here. But of course, this doesn't speak to whether or not there is some falsity. "I don't know what your relationship with her," talking about Kate James, "is at the time since you fired her. You have to be careful that she will cooperate and not go public if you ask her not to be truthful." You see that statement there, talking about truth or the lack thereof. Now A.H. responded by saying, "Marty, I am awaiting to hear back from you before I reach out to Kevin to liaise with Kate. I had no evidence that Miss James was ever in the event actually asked to sign a statement of any kind, and in any event, no evidence that she was asked to sign an untruthful statement. Mr. Murphy said in his re-examination that he refused to ask Miss James to make a statement. In any event, as the QC, that's going to be the person representing NGN, submitted, the suggestion that Miss James might be asked to make a statement that was not truthful came from Marty Singer. Yeah, because it totally didn't come from AH. As I have said, Marty Singer is one of Mr. Depp's American lawyers. Mr. Shearborn submitted that for this purpose. He was representing AH. It was, after all, AH who was being prosecuted in Australia, not Mr. Depp. AH's account was that she was willing to accept responsibility for the offense because a conviction of Mr. Depp might prejudice his future ability to gain a visa for Australia. So basically, they're throwing Depp under the bus here. While it was not open to either of them to decide unilaterally who was to be prosecuted, it meant that Mr. Depp had a very real interest in the prosecution, and there was also a very good reason why Marty Singer should continue to be involved as Mr. Depp's lawyer. I accept AH's evidence on this regard. So she's the one being prosecuted here, but somehow it's all someone else's fault. So let's throw everyone else out. I mean, this is insane. It was also supported by the video in which Mr. Depp and AH jointly made, in which they apologize and underline the importance of observing Australian restrictions on the importation of animals. As I have shown, Miss Callahan was influenced by the video to sentence AH in the way that she did. Now, you have pages of this, but essentially what you have is Kevin Murphy thrown under the bus because he's too connected to Johnny Depp. You have Johnny Depp thrown under the bus because, those lawyers, they might represent him. You have Kate James thrown under the bus because, well, you saw why, and so on. The same thing happens here, which really, look at the defense for this. You have a flagrant note saying that we want to grease vets, but hey, that doesn't count because AH says, well, Johnny Depp, he had me write it on his behalf, or he wrote it, so therefore. So the allegations that AH tried to grease a vet to procure necessary travel documentation for the dogs. Miss Kate James exhibits their witness statement, an email which she received from AH dated 21st of September 2013, which said, can you maybe help Kevin procure a slightly altered health doc that has their shots recorded as 2 days before, so they can leave together on the 25th. Do we have a vet we could grease? Connection. This did concern the dogs, although it's a separate occasion from the entry into Australia. In her fifth witness statement, AH says this, I think this was about Johnny wanting Boo to have shots to to travel. Greece is Johnny's language, not mine. Although I cannot specifically remember, I would likely have written it at Johnny's request. So, you know what the judge says about that? In my view, this is a tangential issue. Whether or not the suggestion of greasing a vet originated with Depp, I will take AH's denial that it originated with her as final. This does not, therefore, impinge upon her credibility. Again, you have everything that this person says taken as truth. Audio tapes, they don't fit in unless they're about Johnny Depp. You have admissions, they don't fit in unless they're about Johnny Depp. Security video, well, that stuff you just got to throw it out because that doesn't mean anything. All of the items about eyewitness testimony, he decides to default on friends of AH. He decides to throw away the police statements there, which I'll make my own video on, and so much more. This stuff, it is egregious. It is absolutely egregious. But apparently, hey, that's the way of things. But anyway, let me know what you thought. And as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. You empowered these endeavors. I can't say that enough. Thank you. You let people like myself cover what we want. And I appreciate the heck out of you for it, too. If you want to support the channel, there are links in the description. And we'll go through this sucker this week. This week, I want to do this. Then I want to take a break from it because, my God, what a mess. But anyway, let me know what you think. And again, as always, thank you. Appreciate you.